Hi, welcome to Storm the Field, your show all about college football for the fans, by the fans, and we're just going to get right into it. This is our week 3 reaction episode. I'm Mathis. I'm joined here by Quentin and Rob on this beautiful Monday, September 19th. Ah, it's already a rough go today. Trey can't be here today. We're going to go ahead and we're going to start off with our headliner results. And our headliner results is pretty much the 4 games we headlined last week and our picks. OU, they routed Nebraska. I think it was what we all picked, but not how we picked it. What was the final score? Was it 49-14 right there? Uh,
14.
the spread was 11, and they just killed them. So regardless, we
I
all
thought we were going to have I thought we were going to have a different game after that opening drive by Nebraska. I thought we were going to have a competitive game, maybe even an upset.
Yeah, I know. I was
Yeah.
super excited, but it seems that our luck has run out. We're back down to planet Earth when it comes to college football. We don't get crazy games every week. Another disappointing matchup. We're going to move on to Oregon over BYU, another rout. And that was a game we were split on. Rob, you and Quentin both ended up having Oregon, and me and Trey had BYU. And the biggest takeaway I had from this game is, dang, Georgia is really good at football because they made that Oregon team look like an
Yeah.
FCS team. Do y'all have
I
anything to
will
add?
say, most games don't turn on just one play, but if they did, BYU was losing 17-7 late in the second quarter, missed a field goal attempt to make it 17-10 going into halftime. And Oregon ended up scoring in the last few seconds of that first half to go up 24-7, and then also got the second half kickoff. So uh, missing that field goal, it was a close game up until that point, and then Oregon just took over.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a rough week when it came to our headliner games. Other than that, though, we actually predicted everything else almost spot on. We originally all had Texas A&M over Miami, and that ended up being a squeaker game. Uh, Trey and Quentin ended up changing their pick on the pick'em just because, in terms of a game strategy, just trying to win. But I don't think that had really anything to do with what they predicted to happen. So we're gonna count that as a win on the results for our headliners. So far, me and Trey are 2-1, and Rob and Quentin are 3-0. And then we move on to what our tiebreaker game was. And if you haven't been with us before, our tiebreaker game is for our pick'em. We pick one game where if me and Rob end up having the same amount of wins and losses, then we look to this game and you look at the overall score and the winner of that game. And for our tiebreaker, I went out on my own and chose Penn State over Auburn with everyone else picking Auburn. And that was probably the most right I've been. And I can only take so much credit because I didn't really think a whole lot of it. It was kind of a toss up for me, and it was anything but. Y'all have anything to
Yeah.
add?
I was like, I think I just took away that Auburn's just not a very good football team from that game. They just did not look very competitive whatsoever.
Well,
And Penn
my deal was, Penn State proved that they're an up and coming team, but they hadn't really shown anything that this year. And I figured, Auburn's emotional loss last year. They're playing at home. Harrison's on the hot seat. I tell you right now, we had some quarterback predictions about A&M football that came true. I think I'm gonna go on record right now and say Harrison is not finishing the season at
Harson.
Auburn. They're 2-1, and most people would think that's good. I see them beating Missouri. I see them beating Western Kentucky, but they have a 6-game stretch.
Where they could lose every
You
single
tell
one of the
me
games.
that's 4 wins. Tell me the other 2 wins are going to get just to even be bowl eligible.
I don't think that. I think he's gonna finish. I think he'll finish the year because I just think that there's not really a point in Auburn like blowing it up. But Austin, like, yeah, if, I think that they can definitely get to be bowl eligible. But
Well, okay, let me ask you this, and I don't, Mathis, I don't know if we want to spend too much time on it, but take Missouri and Western Kentucky out of their schedule. We'll give them those games. You need 2 more wins. You stop me when you think they're going to beat a team. LSU,
Maybe.
Possibly.
Georgia.
No.
LSU maybe. Okay. Georgia, Ole Miss, Arkansas.
Possibly.
Huh?
Possibly.
Ole Miss?
Maybe Ole Miss.
Okay. I would lean more towards Mississippi State, which is the next team. A&M and then Alabama.
Personally, I think Mississippi State's better than Ole Miss this year.
Yeah, I think
even
so,
after last week, I think they just have the weapons on offense.
I don't know though. Auburn not look very good at all.
They're not, and their 2 wins were against group of 5 teams, maybe even an FCS, but I saw a stat through 3 games, and they gave up 4 turnovers against Penn State. They have 0 takeaways this year and have given up the ball 8 times.
Yeah, I don't think the buyout's dropping just because it's so early in his tenure, but I think their mind's pretty much made up. And so
yeah,
I legitimately could see him being gone by Halloween. Maybe right before that bye week. Or maybe after the Georgia and what would be is it?
Well, I'll say this. I'll say if he's not gone, it will be clear that he's gone, and it may be a similar Gary Patterson situation where, hey, we would like for you to finish the season, but you're not coming back next year. I mean, it will be clear that he's not their 2023 coach.
Hey, maybe he'll be at Arizona State, and we'll touch more on that situation. Another shot we called. I'm gonna get into some shots I called here in a second. We're gonna go ahead and move on to our winners and losers segment. And there's so many games in college football, and we have a finite amount of time to talk about things. And so a way we can talk about a bunch of different games, a bunch of different storylines, is if we just kind of simplify it down to winners and losers. And so what we're going to be doing with this segment is we're just going to start off with a winner, then go to a loser. Winner, then loser. And that way we can talk about a bunch of different things, and we're not going to split our time evenly amongst them. We're just going to talk about it to the logical conclusion. And so we're going to go ahead and start off with our first winner, which is the basketball schools. And what I'm referring to is Duke, North Carolina, Kansas. Give me another one. Arizona's 2-1.
Kentucky. Kentucky.
Yeah, they're just. I think all of those teams combined only have 1 loss amongst them, and that would be Mississippi State beating Arizona in a tough one, which I don't think any of us predicted. We didn't talk about that last week.
I will say this. A lot of those teams are legit good. Like Kentucky's legit.
Yeah.
Duke, Kansas. Kansas, I think, is improving. Duke may be improving as well, but I'd be interested to go back in previous years and see where they all were after 3 games. I bet you they all typically were in the range of 2-1, maybe even 3-0.
Yeah.
I think it is interesting, but we may be putting more into it than there really is.
Well, Kansas has beat a Houston team who was ranked less than 2 weeks ago, and they took down West Virginia.
The week before, the week before they lost in overtime to Tech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not criticizing those schools, but does that say more about Kansas being good, or does that say more about Houston being bad and potentially overhyped?
Well, I hate to bring this up as a Longhorn fan, but Kansas beat UT at DKR last year, and It's easy to make fun of Texas for that game because there's a lot to make fun of Texas for. Believe me,
maybe they were good.
Hey, maybe that was an aberration of what's to come. Lance Leipold's a good coach, and I think he's definitely taking this program in the right direction. I'm not saying they're gonna go bowling or anything, but could they end up 4-8, 5-7? I think they're gonna win this next week against Duke, and we'll get into that in our prediction episode on Thursday, I think. But I think this could be like an actual competitor, not in terms of like winning the conference or anything, but I think that they will play competitive games in conference this year. They're not going to be a walkover like they have been in years past. And I guess we'll see how they fare against another basketball school. Could have been our basketball national championship.
I'm actually looking forward to that game. I recommended that be one of the highlight games for this upcoming week for our podcast.
You know what? Hey, we got to show them some love. That's going to be one of our headliners next on Thursday. All right. I have a direction we could take it for our first loser, unless y'all have something that you really want to talk about bad.
Well, I'll let you go. I've got two loser topics I want to briefly hit on, and
okay.
I have one loser topic as well.
All right, Herm Edwards is out at Arizona State, and that is one out of my many shots that I called this last week.
You did?
Yeah, I called, or not this last week. I called this shot. When was it? In our preseason predictions episode, everyone was saying, "Oh, Arizona State's going 8-4. They're going to go 7-5." And I think we all had them at 5-7, except for I think Rob, you had them at 4-8. And I think we all pretty much accounted for there to be a change in leadership. And I hate to predict stuff like that, and I usually don't. But it was a unique situation. I think that was an inevitability, and so I'm interested to see where they're going to go.
You know, obviously they're not playing well on the field, but I think there's more to this story, and maybe some people know more about it than I do. But
I have some knowledge.
I don't know if there was behind the scene improprieties, but there's been a lot of significant coaching staff turnover, head coaches on both sides of the ball, assistant head coaches.
Do you want me to tell you what it's about?
So, yeah.
It was mainly during COVID. They were having recruits on campus and in the buildings, and that wasn't allowed. Yeah. So there's a pending NCAA investigation into that. And
I think it's more than just those coaches didn't leave over the COVID
violations. They got sent home. They got fired, and everyone had been cleaned house except for Herm Edwards so far. Yeah, it was a pretty nasty situation. It's going to hurt that job opening because there's going to be probably pending sanctions, like how many scholarship athletes you're going to be able to have. And so whoever takes that job is going to be and that's what stinks about sanctions like that, because you clean house, and then the next coaching staff is the ones who suffer. The ones who had nothing to do with it. And what is it? Heupel in Tennessee, they're probably going to have some sanctions, lose some scholarships, and he wasn't there. It was the other guy. And so there's nothing he can do about it, but he's the one who's going to suffer. And so I think that might actually hurt the opening. That I don't know if you want to say offseason. They could literally hire someone now, because you're firing coaches in September, which I think on paper is absolutely insane, but it makes sense because you got to get ahead of the curve because you have the early signing period now. You want to get your guy in there. You want to get recruits.
If you know your guy's not coming back next year, why not bring in an interim who could potentially be your head coach next season? You basically given him nearly a whole season to get ready for 2023.
One of the names I've heard thrown out there is Tom Herman, the Texas coach. He went on to be an offensive analyst at Chicago, the Bears, and now he's with CBS, and there might be some interest there. I haven't heard a whole lot, but that's just what I've seen in passing.
This is just a joke, but what about Urban Meyer?
No, well, we can talk about that, but I think there's a job up north, kind of Midwest, that has there's some more interest there. And I still think that he's a little above that. No hate to Big Red and any Nebraska fans who are watching this.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and move on.
Well,
Give me
are we
give
still
me a
doing
winner.
winners and losers?
Yes, someone go
Okay,
ahead and give me another winner.
I'm going to do a winner. I'm going to do 3 quick winners at all in the same game. Just real quick. Winner, Jimbo Fisher finally making the call and pulling up Max Johnson. He wasn't fantastic, but he controlled the ball and didn't turn it over. The Aggie defense being down 2 players because of suspension, losing 2 more because of ejections during the game, the secondary primarily, and the fact they've only given up 2 defensive touchdowns all year. And then lastly, after a very disappointing game against App State the very week before, 107,000 fans showed up to that game, 3rd largest ever at Kyle Field and the largest non-conference game. So winners, A&M fans.
Way to pat yourself on the back there, Rob.
All right, I'm going to follow Rob with 2 losers in the same game. Actually, I guess you could just call one loser. The offensive side of the ball. It was a horrible offensive game. A&M's offense, Max Johnson looked good at the start, but he didn't look great. They only had 264 total yards. I mean, Miami's offense did not look bad, but they just couldn't convert when it mattered. So I don't know. I think that the losers were definitely the offensive side of the ball in that game. But I do think it was a much needed win for A&M though. They needed that.
Shout out to A&M.
It got very tight in that 4th quarter too.
Yeah.
We're gonna do a little bit more.
They tied it up.
We're gonna stick with this game for just a little bit. We're gonna go ahead and get through some of the breakdowns. I'm gonna read y'all off some stats just really quick. And this isn't a winner or loser stat, but we're talking about this game right now. Total yards, 392 to 264. First downs, 27 to 16. Yeah. Rushing, 175 to 124. Passing, 217 to 140. And penalties,
35 to 24.
Yeah, and penalties, there was 52 to 55. Do you know what the first team I mentioned was? Miami. They led you in almost every single category, but they couldn't get in at the end zone where it counts. And I think that has to.
Mathis, that they had 9 minutes more possession, and here's why they didn't do it. They drove the ball, but they could not. They had to settle for field goal attempts. Then they had 3 mistakes in that game, and I think we all know what that first one was, which led to A&M's first touchdown.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a muff punt. They had a field goal missed before that, I think, and then they had a field goal blocked. They had all the statistics. If they could have just finished drives and not made as many mistakes as they had, it would have been an easy win for Miami.
Yeah, I think good teams find a way to win. They didn't get into the end zone and they couldn't convert on those 3rd downs and stuff because A&M has a great defense. They only allowed 3 field goals, and they go 3 for 4 on field goals or something, or 3 for 5.
Yeah.
And I mean,
here's an interesting stat too, which kind of blew my mind. This is the 8th straight loss by Miami against Power 5 teams, non-conference. They have not won a Power 5 game outside of their conference. Probably 8 games, that's probably going back 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I don't put as much stock in that because with the new coaching staff, and you played a team that 2 weeks ago was the 6th ranked team in the country. I think that as the season wears on, that App State loss it's obviously gonna stick out, but it's not gonna stick out so much like a sore thumb. Sore thumb. You're gonna think of A&M as probably a top 15 team, and so I don't put as much. I mean, Miami's a young team. Stuff like this and finding a way to lose games is why you brought Mario Cristobal in. And first-year coach, quarterback with virtually no weapons. That's something I talked about in the prediction, which is why I just didn't feel comfortable going with Miami. Tyler Van Dyke was still a better quarterback than Max Johnson. But shout out to A&M for just I wrote A&M as just one of the winners in general. You figured out a way to win. You had 2 guys suspended or 4 guys suspended, and some seeing significant time, and you still found a way to win.
I mean,
and you bounced back.
and that was the big takeaway I had was A&M's defense. They
Yeah.
had two backs on defense suspended. You had 2 go down during the game due to ejections. I mean, and they were going up against Van Dyke, who is a potential NFL quarterback. And I mean, they just held him to field goal attempts. I thought the defense played really well. They bent but didn't break, you know?
Well, Mathis, going back to what you said about Tyler Van Dyke being better than Max Johnson, I would probably agree that he is. But Max Johnson got to throw 20 passes and Tyler Van Dyke got to throw 41. And they had about the same completions percentage. And I would just like to see Jimbo throw the ball. Like, I know that running attack can be deadly, but it really wasn't. Like, they averaged 4 yards per attempt, and which that is good. But when you're 4 for 12 on third down, you need to be able to extend these possessions and use your athletes how you recruited these amazing athletes. So why don't you use them? I mean, throw the ball. Like
I think they've got incredible running backs, and I think to help them out, you just got to open up the passing game and make defense play the pass, and then you'll start getting big chunks in the run game.
I mean Miami still had 25 more plays than A&M did.
If you're A&M, you can't afford to play 1-score games all year. You just can't.
No.
Because, I mean, the next 3 games you have, you get Arkansas, which that game looks you have a little more breathing room with that game, seeing what we saw last week. Or you could also look at it as Arkansas was overlooking Missouri State, which means
I think it's more that personally.
Then you still have cause for concern then because they don't look unbeatable now.
You could say during the App State game, A&M was looking past them, way past them, to this upcoming Miami game.
And I think that games like that can be an aberration. I think if I mean I don't think Marshall beats Notre Dame every time they play. So, but you see the times they do play, and which is only once, and so I'm really excited. That's definitely gonna be one of our headliner games this next week. But after that, you have Mississippi State at Mississippi State, and then you're on the road against Bama. And so you don't really have a whole lot of time to get ready. So you got to open it up, and you got to change, and you got to make changes quick. Because
if A&M has any hope of a decent bowl game this year, they have to win their next 2 games.
Yeah.
They have to.
You got to put teams away. You can't just let them hang around.
I feel comfortable as if I were an A&M fan, I would feel way more comfortable when I start seeing the time of possession look more even or more in A&M's favor. But when you're losing the time of possession by 10 minutes still, like they lost about, I don't even know, like 25 minutes last week to App State. But when you're still losing by like 9.5 minutes. So I'd like to see that time of possession start to even out and the number of plays even out. I think I'd feel more comfortable in the offense.
Well, my gosh, give the defense a break.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 quick losers I want to talk about. Notre Dame won against Cal. Sorry, Trey. But I think that was a bad win. They just did not look good. I think Notre Dame, I've got to include them as one of my losers. They're 1-2. They finally won a game, but if I were a Notre Dame fan, I would still not be happy even with that win. And then my last loser is obviously I've talked about before, and that's Harrison. I think that poor showing at home. I mean, I was watching Josh Pate yesterday, and he said he was looking at, I can't remember what he was looking at, but he was looking at something on his phone in the 4th quarter, and he had the volume up, and he could actually hear it while he was down on the field.
Yeah, it was pretty
shouldn't be able to do that at an SEC game, especially in Auburn.
Yeah. We just for some context, we go over to Rob's house for a lot of college football games. So most Saturdays we're over there, and he has a two TV setup, and one we have with sound, and one we have without. So we have like a main TV and like a second TV. And I think it was about the third quarter when we just switched that game over. That was our headliner tiebreaker game. It's supposed to be a great game, one we were glued to until triple zeros hit, and we had it switched over to the secondary TV.
It was sad and embarrassing.
Not for me though, because I got the tiebreaker. I'm gonna take as much credit for that. And speaking for something, I'm gonna take a lot of credit for my other shot that I called. If you haven't seen it, go back to our SEC season prediction episode. Go to about halfway through that video. You're going to see when we talked about a certain school. And that certain school is the Vanderbilt Commodores. And preseason, I predicted that over-under of 2.5 wins, you were going to be able to cash it out by September. I said they were going to beat Hawaii, and then they were going to beat Elon, and then they were going to finish it off with NIU. And guess what games they've won? Hawaii, Elon, and NIU. And so
I predicted too, so
I know. I'm just going to take credit. I'm not making fun. I'm not gloating, but yes, I am. I love my Commodores.
Well, now let me ask you this, Mathis. I predicted them to be 2-1 at this point, but I think we all predict them to go 0-9 from this point out.
0-8, yeah.
I don't know.
No, I think 9. I think everybody still has a non-conference.
They played week 0, I think, so they're already 3-1.
Say it again.
They're 3-1.
They're 3-1.
Oh, they're 3-1. So okay, 0-9, 0-8. Oh, I think.
I don't know. They could beat Mizzou.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, but I'm talking about preseason projections.
Oh yeah.
We all had them 0-8 in conference.
I was right there. I almost switched that game, but I didn't want to be.
And that's not to say, that's not to say that a game time decision we might switch our vote for the actual week. So
I don't know, but I think just out of honor, we need to put the Vanderbilt game in the pick'em the rest of the time.
No.
Just in honor of the Commodores. I actually have control over what teams I put in there, so I'm going to.
Ties to Vanderbilt or something. He's got stock in the school.
Yep, my quarterback went there, so shout out Ken.
I have one more winner.
Okay.
Texas is rushing 298 yards on 36 attempts. Bijan Robinson had 202 yards with 2 touchdowns.
Yeah,
so
that was total.
Heisman sleeper. Maybe Heisman sleeper. Maybe, I don't know.
Hey, speaking of that Texas game, do you guys remember me saying that Texas could be the first team ever to rise in the polls after a loss?
That's exactly what happened.
And to fall in the polls with the win, and they did.
Well, let's stick with the Texas game for just a second.
I think that's because in the third quarter it was still a game.
Yeah, let's stick with that Texas game for just a minute. We all predicted that. I mean, Quentin was the one who actually said it for upset alert in our last prediction episode, but I think we were all kind of on the same page with saying, hey, this is like a sleeper, because we've just seen this song and dance so many times with Texas. They have a big, high-profile, close game, and they either win or lose, and then they lose the next week to a team that has no business coming in their house and beating them. Yeah. And the game, at one point, it was 17-7, and I think
that was well into the third quarter.
It was second. It was second quarter. It was They ended up scoring 10 straight to get taken at half, and UTSA only got a field goal in the second half, and UT just kind of handled them the rest of the way. And I think that shows more maturity than they had last year. One of their big things last year was they looked not terrible outside of that Arkansas game and up until the halftime of the OU game. And then OU took the lead, and Texas just started to lose lead after lead after lead.
What did they say? OU beat them 7 times last year.
Yeah, pretty much. But they just blew lead after
They just never could get over that second half loss and lost their next 6 games.
Yeah, including one to
Or
Kansas.
yeah,
Just terrible.
yeah.
And so that was something I was worried about because sure there was a lot of transfers and you had a whole nother offseason. But when you just have a culture of coming up short and stuff like that over the last what is it 10 years now that stuff is like that has happened and this is coming from a someone who wants Texas to be good. And so I've just seen this so much, and I had no idea what to expect out of Sark and this UT team. And shout out to them. I have just Texas listed down as a winner because they looked adversity in the eye. And what Sark said in the postgame was he said they didn't blink. And I think that shows that this team's matured. And
Yeah.
I guess we'll see what happens when they get into conference play. They have Tech and then West Virginia going into that OU game. Maybe that OU game or a week after or something like that, you'll get your starter back. And then I think that's when you'll be on your feet. But you're not out of the woods. You got to treat every game like it's that Bama game or that OU game because you don't want to overlook anyone. Because when you overlook someone, like we almost saw with Arkansas, what we saw last week with A&M, what you saw with Notre Dame, stuff like that can happen. When you're coming off a big win or you have a big game coming up, you just kind of mail it in. And that's something you can't really afford to do. And so, shout out to Texas for
We
handling
know
business.
Notre Dame wasn't looking past. We all know Notre Dame wasn't looking past Marshall for the Cal game.
Yeah, I was mentioning that as they were coming off an Ohio State game, so they just kind of rolled out of bed.
Okay, I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
Also,
Speaking,
Quinn Ewers has been back at practice, and his injury timetable has updated and improved. So there's whispers about next week at Tech, and then there's really good hope for the next week at West Virginia.
I did not know that. That's really interesting. I would sit him at Tech. I don't think you want to push it that soon.
If he can play West Virginia, I'd definitely play him at West Virginia.
Yeah, you
at least the first one.
Yeah,
You can't put him in. You can't throw him in the OU game cold turkey.
Hey, and I think it could be. I think it could be a really, really good thing for this Texas team if you're going into these games beat up and you are able to pull out wins. Because what that does is it gives some of your guys who weren't going to have an opportunity to play, it gives them game experience. And so, God forbid, Quinn Ewers has a season-ending injury. You can still be functional with Hudson Card. And sure, the safety net's gone after there. Yeah,
did
Card
Card
played.
play the whole game?
Yeah, he did.
The whole game?
I think so.
In UTSA? Yeah.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah, I don't think they put their third string in, but because they didn't really take a. I think it was still like a 15-point game or something with like 5 or 6 minutes to go, and so they ended up making. I think they won by 21. I think it was final scores 20-41, and coming off the sentiment of overlooking games, you know who just lost to Tulane? Kansas State. You know who they play next week? OU. And so that's textbook what we were just talking about. And so I don't think Tulane's a better team than Kansas State, but they were more prepared.
Yeah.
And
It'd
Manhattan.
be such a cool thing if K-State goes and beats OU next week. It'd be the most Big 12 moment of all time.
Hey, well, they've been preparing for the game for 2 weeks. So,
Yeah.
Because they weren't preparing for Tulane. They were getting ready for OU. I guarantee you that's what happened. I didn't watch that game. We had more pressing matters. A game we did have on is boy, this is another one we were off on. Washington just beat up on Michigan State. Michigan State made it a real mission to run the ball, and they were not able to at all. And Washington's offense looked really good.
Yeah, that was a potential upset of the week right there.
Well, they were favored.
Yeah, that.
And I think that.
Yeah, if you're looking at Vegas, but I mean, I think everyone in the nation looks at that as being a major upset.
Guys, you know what? I didn't work in the show. I didn't work in the polls. The new AP poll. I completely forgot about that. Speaking of, they put Washington at, what was it, 16?
18.
18?
After the game.
Yeah, so recently, so Texas did
Yeah,
move
Washington
down.
is 18.
Huh?
Washington is 18.
I just think that's
I'm not really mad at that.
Do you want to talk about the polls real quick?
no. We'll just that's all the winners and losers I have. So if y'all want to talk about the polls really quick, or if y'all want to go ahead and get into upset or game of the week.
I was just going to say with the polls, the biggest movements up was Ohio, Penn State by eight spots, Oregon by 10. Oregon right now, I don't know this for a fact, but right now Oregon may have the biggest drop and the biggest leap so far. I think
Miami
dropped
more than Oregon.
Huh?
Miami dropped more than Oregon.
Miami dropped 12 spots. You're right.
Yeah.
But
BYU
still,
went down 7.
Oregon, after week 1, Oregon dropped quite a bit, and then they kind of stayed where they were, and then they moved up significantly after this past week. One major drop and one major rise.
Yeah. Hey, so Florida played terrible. They beat USF by a missed field goal.
Yeah.
Did you see that field goal?
Yep.
The holder dropped the ball and it was end to end on the ground, and the guy kicked it and it had the length. It was just off a little bit. There's no way he was going to miss that.
Hope. There was hope on the sidelines that was going to clear the goalpost.
Yeah,
I mean, they were like,
yeah, that was crazy. I think they should. I'll go ahead and add them on. Miami's one of my losers. Florida, I'm sorry, is one of my losers for the week. And
yeah,
I have a winner. Pac-12, 4 ranked teams, soon to be possibly 2 more with Washington State and Oregon State.
Yeah,
Pac-12's looking pretty good right now, playing fairly well.
Yeah, they actually look like a pretty good conference.
Better than the ACC, in my opinion.
Who do you think's in a better position to make a playoff spot if they still have a chance? Utah at number 13 or Oregon at 15? I think Oregon looked a lot better than Utah has so far.
Let me look at Utah's games really quick.
I think the USC might be the most likely out of all of them.
Well,
although I will say Utah is 2-1, and one interception in an end zone, take that away, and they're 3-0.
Yeah, I think Utah is a really good team. I'm not going to overreact. They've let up 14 points since. They've just drummed teams. And they start conference against Arizona State next week. And so we will definitely see what that Herm Edwards Arizona State team is capable of. And
the headless Arizona State.
Yeah.
What, Devils? Sun Devils?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
All right, but let's go ahead and we'll get into the game of the week. And before we get into that, we're going to go ahead and talk about our pick'em order. Because if you don't know, we have our headline games, and I think Rob, what did I go? I guess we
both went 26 and 4.
Yeah, we went 26 and 4, but in our headlines we went, I think, all 3-1.
Okay, headline games, yeah.
Rob ended up, we all just about went 3-1, and so yeah. So the order this week,
I'm going to pat myself on the back for the second time today. One being an Aggie fan, and the second one straight up won week 1 and week 2 in the pick'em, and it took a tiebreaker in week 3, and so I tied for first in week 3 and lost on a tiebreaker.
To be completely fair, I was planning on switching my pick from
all these young whippersnappers.
To be fair, I was planning on switching from Mississippi State to LSU, and then I realized that kickoff had already started, so it was locked in. And so I was just nervous and mad at myself the whole time, and it turned out that I didn't need it, and I won regardless. And so because I called my shot with that Penn State game, it was slightly over. So if Trey had one more win, which Trey ended up in last place, if he had one more win, then Trey would have won, I think, 1 or 2.
Well, he would have won the tiebreaker.
Yeah.
To be fair, me and Trey are just competitors. We had to change it. We changed our pick to Miami. That's why
Yeah,
we dropped. I would actually have beat Rob easily because I picked him.
you gave up a chance. You hurt your overall record for the end of the season on a prayer and a hope for winning the week.
Well,
not a prayer and a hope. A&M's looked terrible this year, so it was not really a prayer and a hope. It was like
yeah, I was pretty flip floppy on that
Obviously
game.
a bad call, a bad move.
Well, you were just not.
Hey, now y'all know
You're
how
not
I feel on that
competitive
BYU game.
You can't even call it a bad beat. I'm not going to change my picks for strategy. I'm gonna pick the teams I think are going to win.
Well, he's not competitive enough to pick against his Aggies.
I own you, Rob.
But I think we're all gonna pick up a game on Rob next week when we all pick Arkansas and he picks A&M.
I guess we'll see. I'll have to do some more research, see what's going on. But so that puts me in first place, Rob in second, and Quentin will be third. And for the game of the week, I know we already talked about A&M and Miami. That's definitely on my list. But for my game of the week, I like to go a little out of the box so we can talk about more games.
Yeah, and you're going to say the same game I'm going to say.
Syracuse versus Purdue.
No. App State and Troy.
No, okay, we'll get into Syracuse versus Purdue first. That was a good game. And that was another one that we missed on. And
it was.
That was a fun game. I don't really have a whole lot of stats for you or anything. We all thought Purdue was just going to go in there and handle it. And a sack interception. He trying to throw the ball away, threw it right into a D lineman's stomach. And that ended up giving Syracuse in the end the win. They went on to have
That's not what did it.
I know, but if
Purdue won that game. They scored at the end of the game, and then they had back-to-back stupid penalties. I think it cost them 15 yards from the 35 to the 20. They got another 15-yard penalty that backed them up from the 20 to the 10. And what happened? Syracuse scores on the last freaking play of the game.
There's like 7 seconds left. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a crazy one. So that's my pick. We'll probably make the rounds. Trey's not here, so we'll just mention any games that we don't have. So Rob, you're next. You got App State.
I've got
Troy
App State beating Troy. As much as I can't blame App State for beating A&M, all the respect to them, but they have got a bandwagon of fans across the nation. Game day was held at App State, and they had one of the most miracle come from behind wins. Last play of the game, Hail Mary falls about 10 yards shy, pops out to one guy who's got a blocker in front of him, and almost just walks in the end zone, gets mobbed by everybody. I think he got mobbed by a camera guy.
Yeah, I'm a little off the App State hype train. I'm gonna be a little bit of a hater. If everyone's just gonna I'm kind of reactionary in the opposite way. Like if everyone's hopping on something, I'm just gonna be anti whatever that is. So if liking App State is just trendy right now, everyone's like, oh, they beat a top 10 team, which means they're like everyone said, oh, it's gonna be a double-digit game. They're a Sun Belt team for a reason.
I agree with you. The way I look at App State right now is they remind me of a team in March Madness that got in, by winning their conference, wouldn't have made it otherwise. And I'm not saying Chicago. I can't pronounce the Chicago.
Loyola.
Yeah. There was a couple of years there where they were just everybody's favorite. They weren't a good team, but everybody liked that old nun that showed up to the games and wore the school colors and everything. That's the way I see this app. I think it's good for football. That non-Power 5 teams are getting some headlines, and it was a little corny game day being at App State, but boy, did they pick a good game to go to.
Yeah, and this was honestly a week where there wasn't a whole lot of good games, but
Yeah.
I think they could have chosen something better. So, Quentin, do you have anything?
Cal Notre Dame. I think it was a very good game. Came down to like 2 bounces at the end is why Cal lost.
Okay,
I don't know,
that's a good one.
Game. I picked Notre Dame, but I was really hoping that Cal would win, just because Notre Dame gets so much love. I'm just tired of it. So much national bias towards Notre Dame in recent years.
You know, they still, like after last week, after going 0-2, they still got votes for the top 25. Just ridiculous. Okay, I have one more. I don't know if any of y'all are going to mention this, and Trey's not here, so we can go ahead and get a fourth, fifth, or sixth, or however many y'all want to add. FSU at Louisville was a fantastic game. Friday night.
That was.
It was just great. Florida State already missing some guys going into that game. Jordan Travis goes down, and their backup looked terrible in the first half. And they came out and they just were slinging it. And they came out on top. And I think that was just a great game. I'm not going to be super analytical. I'm not going to throw stats at you. But I thought it was just super entertaining. I was supposed to be doing homework during.
That was the loss that cost me the week. I picked Louisville to win that game, and man, they almost pulled it out. It was a very exciting game.
Yeah.
It really was.
All right. Well, that's it for our. Quentin, do you have anything?
No, I have another game now.
Okay, well, we're just going to go through some of these games. I'm looking at them right now, see if there's anything we want to add. Georgia just killed South Carolina. I don't think there's really much to that. I don't have anything that you can't think of yourself.
Michigan's looking good.
Yeah, Michigan looks really good.
Michigan's only allowed one or two touchdowns all year.
Hey, I think they might be better than Ohio State again.
Yeah. How about Georgia? No one really talks about their defense like they did last year. They're talking about them as good as they are. They're going to have a letdown on the defensive side because they lost so many starters. They actually have allowed fewer points to date this year than they did last year, and they were unbelievable on defense.
Just dreading that. I'm not ready for Georgia to just repeat.
Yeah.
Jeez. Kansas took care of Houston. 48.
Yeah.
They won by 18 points. Wow. It's 3
Decisively.
scores. Yeah. Kansas actually, they look impressive.
What about that Wake Forest game? Didn't Liberty have a chance at the end to beat Wake Forest? They lost by 1 point.
I think so.
Yeah.
And then we got Mississippi State, LSU. That was a pretty good game. I think that it got kind of boring in the second half because you just knew what was going to happen. But
Brian Kelly's 1-0 in SEC play.
Congratulations.
You all doubted him.
NC State won against Tech by 13, but they were +3 in the turnovers. And so Tech actually shot themselves in the foot and I think ended up costing themselves this game. I'm not super impressed with NC State so far this year, which is disappointing for me because I picked them to beat Clemson and go on to the ACC championship, and it could still happen, but I'm not super impressed right now. I'm pretty underwhelmed.
Well, the best thing for NC State in that game is that doesn't count for their conference wins or losses.
There's 2 games I want to talk about still, and then we'll go ahead and get out of here. I know we got some Monday Night Football we want to see. Missouri State, Arkansas. I know we already mentioned it, but wow. They didn't take the lead until there was like 8 or 9 minutes left. Like it was.
Yeah, and they were at home.
Yeah, it didn't look good. Well, who was it? Bobby Petrino?
I think that was a little fluky, personally.
Yeah, I think they were just overlooking them, but they just didn't look like they were that focused. It's like, and it was an ESPN Plus game, so we couldn't watch. And do y'all have anything to add for that game?
No.
All right. Well, the last game I wanted to mention was Fresno State USC, and because I came home and I watched the second half of that game, essentially, maybe middle of the second quarter when I got home. USC's offense just kind of opened up the floodgates in the second half, but Fresno State competed for a large
Yeah,
amount of
it
that
was
game.
closer than the score.
Hey, and
Let me ask you.
they had turnovers and stuff, so it's like
Yeah.
it's not like they shot themselves in the foot too.
Yeah.
After Lincoln Riley and all those players left Oklahoma to go to USC, who do you think is the better team today, Oklahoma or USC?
Oklahoma.
I think so too.
Yeah,
I think Oklahoma's I think they're a better team today than they ever were last year.
they just look like they're more balanced.
Yeah.
Oklahoma's not a team you're probably going to score 40 on unless you're like an Alabama, Georgia, someone who like has real offensive weapons, or Ohio State and Michigan might be a shootout then.
Yeah.
But
I mean, Oklahoma is ranked 6th in the nation, and I can't argue with that. But USC, I think they're getting some of that Notre Dame type love.
I guess we'll see a lot more about them. I think it's October 15th is when they go up to Utah, and so that's when we'll learn a lot more about them. All right, is there anything y'all want to add before we get off?
No.
Good.
All right, well, that's all we have for you. Thanks for watching. Come back on Thursday when we have our predictions for Week 4 episode. If y'all have any games you want us to specifically talk about, leave it down in the comments. We'd love it if you like the video and subscribe to the channel. Hit us up on any of the socials. We really appreciate it. We will see y'all next time.